Prime Minister, can I follow up on that? Ed Miliband said this morning, if you're turning up for the job of Prime Minister, why don't you turn up for the job interview and turn up for the debate tonight?
Well, this debate is part of a series that was agreed that in order to unlock the logjam of TV debates. And this was a debate for the opposition parties, not for the governing parties. And so that's where it's being held, and that's why it's being held. And as I say, you're going to hear a whole lot of opinions. You're going to hear from the reds and the blues and the greens and the yellows. In fact, there are 2 greens there tonight, if you add it all up. But they all want the same thing. They want to scrap the plan that's turned the country around. You will see in front of you tonight the potential there is for a coalition of chaos in our country. And that is the choice at this election. There are only 2 people that can walk back through the door of number 10 Downing Street. I can walk back through that door and I can carry on the work of getting this country back to work, cutting people's taxes, making it easier to own your home, getting good school places for your children, making sure Britain continues to be a success. Or you can have Ed Miliband walking through that door, backed by this coalition of chaos, including the SNP here in Scotland, who actually think the only problem with Ed Miliband is that although he wants more borrowing, more spending, more taxes, more unlimited welfare, the only problem is he should want even more spending, even more borrowing, even more taxes, and even more unlimited benefit. That is the coalition of chaos that you'll see on your television screens tonight. And the way to avoid it is to vote Conservative. You don't have to wait till May the 7th. You can vote when your ballot papers arrive. But people must vote against the outcome they don't want, the chaos, and in favour of the outcome they do want, which is to continue with a plan that is working for our country.
OK, who else there? Anushka?
Thank you. Anushka Astana, Sky News. In terms of specific costed policies, the Conservative Manifesto is offering a pretty big giveaway for voters. In the face of IMF warnings, how can people really believe that you'll balance the books in 3 years? And, Prime Minister, I see that Ed Balls today has suggested that there was money left in 2010. Have you been exaggerating the situation?
Well, if you want an answer to that one, just listen to the reaction. But first of all, on what we are saying in our manifesto in the IMF, what we are saying is in the last Parliament, we had to make a structural adjustment of £120 billion. This time, it's just £30 billion. In the last Parliament, we cut taxes by £10 billion. In this Parliament, we're promising to do it by £7 billion. The only number that is increased is in the last Parliament, we put an extra, above inflation, £7 billion into the NHS, and in the next Parliament, we're saying it will be £8 billion. Those numbers demonstrate that what we are doing is practical, achievable, sensible, and it's based on a track record in government. Now, let me turn to what Ed Balls has said, because I think this is, frankly, appalling. The note that was left was correct. It said there was no money left. And let's think about the consequences of that. Think about the consequences of what we inherited and what we had to do. We had to make difficult decisions. We had to find efficiencies in government spending. We had to put up some taxes. We had to make some very, very difficult decisions to get this country back on track. Because that note that said no money left, that was referring to the fact that our budget deficit was forecast to be bigger than the budget deficit in Greece when I became Prime Minister. So Ed Balls saying this is some kind of joke, I think is frankly the most appalling thing I've heard in this election campaign so far. I'm not surprised he was Ed Miliband's 3rd choice to be his shadow chancellor. Frankly, he is the country's last choice to be put in charge of this nation's finances, a point I'll make when I visit his constituency.
Brian Taylor, BBC Scotland. Brian Taylor, BBC Scotland.
Thanks very much, Brian Taylor, BBC Scotland. Prime Minister, you're already promising an English income tax. Why not go the whole way? Why not have full fiscal autonomy for Scotland and also thereby full fiscal autonomy for England? It would end the cross-border whinging that has dogged so much of your premiership. I mean, go on, Prime Minister. You know you want to.
Well, I don't, actually. I don't. Look, you know, I am a true believer in our United Kingdom. When I said it would have broken my heart if Scotland had voted to leave the United Kingdom, I absolutely meant it. And to me, the United Kingdom is not just a place on the map. It's not just a brilliant history. It's not just actually even a bright future about the things we can do in the world. It's not just our armed forces, our foreign policy, what Britain means in the world. It's also solidarity. And that is what the fiscal union is about. That if parts of Scotland have a difficult year, the rest of the United Kingdom is there for you to help. If parts of England have a difficult time, parts of Scotland are there to help. We have one pension system, so when people retire, they know that if they paid in, they get a good basic state pension. Incidentally, £950 more per year since I became Prime Minister, and that's as true in Scotland as it is anywhere else. So I don't want full fiscal autonomy. I think it would be bad for Scotland, as the IFS figures demonstrate, but it'd be bad for the country I love. And that country is called the United Kingdom. And it's a solidarity union as well as a union of nations. And let's not forget that here in the Conservative Party.
I'd like to add to that, if I may. We know more than in any other part of the UK how much the bonds between ourselves and our neighbours have been tested and scrutinised in the last 2 years. And we came to a decision and we decided that it is absolutely right that if you pay in during your life, that you get the same out in your pension, whether you're a pensioner in Kirkcaldy or whether you're a pensioner in Cardiff. That's part of what makes our country, and it's part of what makes our country great. And as I've watched, probably in more detail than you, Prime Minister, the twisting and turning on full fiscal autonomy by Nicola Sturgeon in the last few days and weeks, it reminds me of that cry that goes up, "Oh Lord, give me full fiscal autonomy, just not yet." I don't know what our position is today. I've read it in the Scotsman that it might have shifted yet again. Their long-term plan appears to change from day to day to day. Tomorrow it will be something else as well. But we know in our hearts as well as in the vote that we cast that Scotland is a proud nation, but it is a proud part of the nation-state of this United Kingdom that we built and we have ownership of, that we want to stay a member of, and we want to see the benefits spread right through these lands. Because we're not selfish, because we want to share, and because we believe that broader shoulders lifts everybody's lives, and that's what we voted for in September.
Exactly right. Exactly right.
Now we've got James Mates from ITV.
Prime Minister, a serious analysis of all recent polling yesterday put your chances of getting majority at 4% only. Is it wise to continue ruling out deals with the opposition parties? Aren't you going to need at least one of them if you're going to hang on to Downing Street?
Well, the truth is this. We are only 23 seats short from an overall majority. And I believe that overall majority is achievable. And here's why I think it's even more important since this campaign began. What are the new facts of this election campaign? I would argue there are two new facts that have come across in this campaign. Fact number one, the Labour Party here in Scotland is facing wipeout at the hands of the SNP. Fact number two, the Liberal Democrats are facing wipeout potentially in many parts of the country. What that means is that Ed Miliband can only get into Downing Street on the back of support from the Scottish National Party, who will exact a terrible price in terms of even more borrowing, even more spending, even more unlimited welfare, and even weaker defences. That is the terrible prospect this country faces. And frankly, the conclusion from those two facts is this. There is only one way to stop that from happening. You can't stop it from happening by voting Liberal Democrat. They can't stop anything. You can't stop it by voting UKIP. That just makes a Labour MP and a Labour victory more likely. The only way you can stop this dreadful outcome is by voting Conservative in England, in Scotland, in Wales, in Northern Ireland. We are the only people that can stop this from happening. We're the only ones who can form an overall majority to continue the plan that's working for Britain, to continue creating those jobs, to continue helping with those livelihoods, those homes, those schools, that retirement, but also the only people who can stop this dreadful proposition of a weak Labour leader propped up by the SNP wrecking our country. That's the truth.
Thank you. Last question, Nick at The Guardian.
Thank you, Nick Watt from The Guardian. Prime Minister, I'm just wondering what you say to those people who say that for a century the Conservative Party was on the wrong side of devolution in the United Kingdom, on the wrong side of Irish Home Rule, on the wrong side of the devolution referendums here in Scotland. And those people are now saying that you're once again playing a very dangerous game with the Union by making very questionable and challengeable claims about the largest pro-Union party in Scotland, who are in a bare-knuckle fight for survival with all the questions that means about the Union with the SNP, who they loathe with a great passion?
Well, I would say look at the record of this Conservative Prime Minister in office. Who was it who gave the Welsh a referendum on lawmaking powers for the Assembly? Who held that important yes-no referendum here in Scotland respecting the decision of the Scottish Parliament? Who's worked night and day to make sure that the institutions in Northern Ireland continue and we have devolved government in Northern Ireland? And who, frankly, after the election, is the only person committed to solving the English question and having English votes for English laws in a fair settlement? That is the Conservative leader. That's what I'm doing. Now, let me answer very directly this issue about the battle here in Scotland. The fact that Labour is facing a meltdown and is failing to speak out about people's concerns, that is not my... I'm responsible for many things, believe me. Many things. The total failure of Labour in Scotland, you cannot lay at my doorstep, right? Now, as I say, that has created a fact, and a fact that almost every single pollster and commentator and everybody else agrees on, which is come May the 8th, Labour are going to have a dreadful time in Scotland and are going to be replaced in many, many constituencies by the SNP. That has a consequence. The consequence is Ed Miliband cannot become Prime Minister without SNP support. That has a consequence for Scotland, but it has a consequence for the rest of the United Kingdom. It is an appalling prospect of having a Labour Prime Minister propped up by a group of people who only, A, don't want to be in that parliament, B, don't want to be in that country, C, would like to see the whole thing break up, and in the meantime are going to push for an economy-wrecking, borrowing, taxing and spending agenda. Now, I say this because I think the country really needs to hear this. Voters need to think about this. Those ballot papers are about to arrive on the doorstep. And you can stop this. You can stop this from happening, but you can only stop it by electing a Conservative majority government, which will, as this government has, govern for the entire United Kingdom and govern with the Scottish government with respect, as I've done throughout these last 5 years.
If I could say this, Ed Miliband, Jim Murphy, Ed Balls, everybody throughout this entire campaign has had chance after chance after chance to say they wouldn't do a deal with the SNP, that they wouldn't give them concessions in order to get themselves into government and into number 10. And every single time they have ducked that opportunity. And the people of Scotland, never mind the rest of the UK Prime Minister, need to know that that's on the cards before they pass their vote. And the one thing that I'm concerned about, because I look in the whites of the eyes of the SNP every single day of my working life in the Scottish Parliament, is that they do nothing unless it brings them closer to independence. So yeah, there's a price list and a checklist and a shopping list that's already written up, and we know what it is. We know that that's reducing our defences. We know that that's increasing the deficit, increasing the debt, increasing the borrowing. But don't think that snuck in on the end of that shopping list won't be more things to bring us closer to the independence that we all just voted against. And that's why we need to point out to the voters of this country that that dodgy deal is being done by the Labour Party, and shame on them for doing it. Shame on them. Thank you very much.
Completely right. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Well spoken.